Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today as we get an update on what is going on from an economic development standpoint at the city and the county. I am Elizabeth Case. I own Yellow Dog Consulting. I will be your fearless host for this day, keeping things moving forward, keeping an eye on your questions in the chat as you have them, and helping out any way I can. So we're gonna get started this morning and let Matt Craigie from Washington County talk about what's going on there and kind of give us a nice overview of what's been happening. And Dan Diaz from the city of Hillsborough will jump on and talk about what's been going on at the city. And sorry, letting people in at the same time. My ADD is getting the best of me this morning. And then have Dan or Dan then Matt. We'll let them duke it out here in a moment for that. And then we'll open it up for some questions and conversation and let this kind of be free flowing for what's going on with you. So with that, Dan, Matt, would one of you prefer to get started? Kick things off here?
Arm wrestle you for it, Dan.
Do it.
Given the size of your biceps, Matt, then I think I lose and I'll go first.
I'm a biker. I don't have any biceps, but I will go ahead and go first. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Deanna, for the invitation this morning. My name is Matt Craigie. I'm Washington County's Economic Development Manager. Before I get going here, I want to introduce my newest colleague here, Adrienne Chalet. You can see her. She's on the to my right here. Adrienne started last week. She has to jump to another commitment here for a little bit, so I want to just make sure that we get a little intro here. So Adrienne is Washington County's new senior small business coordinator. So she's going to be working with me and our colleague Greg Golubaroko, who is Washington County's workforce coordinator, on ARPA investments that the county is making across the area, and particularly focused on small business support. So I can talk a little bit about this during this conversation here, but you'll be seeing more of Adrienne. Adrienne, I'm going to post your email in the chat here so folks can reach out directly to you at some point. So very, very excited to have her on board.
Great to meet you all. And yes, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to get coffee with you and get to know each of you.
Great. Thank you. Well, Deanna asked me to come and talk about the economy. So I started doing all this homework about what's happening in the economy. So I don't know if I'm super prepared to give the update of what's happening at the county. No, I'm just kidding. I got all sorts of things we can talk about. We're working on a whole variety of things, but I do think maybe starting to ground this conversation a little bit in kind of what we're seeing in the headlines might be helpful here. I'm sure I'm tracking all of the same things that you all are, right? The workforce is in tumult and inflation is up and everyone's making memes about supply chain issues going on. And I think, that manifests in the local economy in a number of different ways, right? Inflation is definitely real. Looking at some of the statistics, it is up. The consumer price index is up over 8% in the last 12 months. And that's huge. And we know that that has a major impact on small businesses. So that means, the inputs for small businesses, whether it's labor or supplies, are all going through the roof. We know that has major impact on all the work that you do. I find the workforce stories to be particularly interesting. If you look at the macro level data, Washington County has, I think we actually have the lowest unemployment rate in the state right now. And I think we are at or near the lowest unemployment rate that we've had in the past 20 years. So when I checked, it was 3.1% in March, which is really phenomenal. And actually, the last time it got about this low was the spring of 2020, right before the pandemic took off that March. So it's a buyer's market for workers, and I'm sure this is something that you're seeing and you're experiencing in your work, is that workers have a lot of choice around. Or more choice, shall I say? No problem, Elizabeth. It was like the host has muted you. I'm like, what did I say?
I was trying to mute somebody else. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, anyway, I think you're all kind of seeing what's happening there in the workforce, and it's really interesting. I'm skeptical about this story about the Great Resignation. I think that we're definitely in this inflection point. I think that the few friends that I know that were really excited about van life are now back at their jobs, and I think that's less of a thing. We are certainly seeing lots of retirements right now, which is typical after economic turmoil. Not a lot of folks will retire in the middle of kind of the tumult that then when the opening presents itself, especially with the way that the stock market is going, you can see more of that. It is interesting though. I think we are definitely now moving into what folks are we've been calling, where's the new normal, what's happening, and this is continuing to affect businesses. I mean, I think you might have seen that some of the pandemic era businesses like Peloton and some of the e-grocery apps are really kind of struggling right now. I will say, so who knows if those kind of companies have staying power. I will say that hybrid work is here to stay, and this is a very self-serving comment, of course, because again, I am calling in from my son's room. I would love to meet you all in person, and would love to do that, but I think the flexibility there of having hybrid work is something that companies are learning will work, and workers can be just as productive. So I think to kind of think a little bit more about some of the lessons that that we are learning as we kind of go through COVID and kind of coming into this more kind of long tail of recovery, is definitely that we do better by working together and by looking for opportunities to share resources or tackle shared challenges. We can better serve small businesses and entrepreneurs. So, thinking about some of my reflections before this meeting, I do want to give a huge thank you to the business recovery centers, which includes the Washington County Chamber. They did a tremendous job in making sure that PPE, they distributed thousands of packets of PPE over the course of the pandemic, help businesses get access to grants and loans, provided really important and timely guidance on changing business models to get through the pandemic. So I do want to send a special thank you to Deanna, Nancy Lopez, who's now with Centro Cultural, Johanna Fernanda. I see Bernardo on the call, and folks at some of the other BRCs, including Maribel and her team at Adelante Mujeres, Alicia and Gustavo at the Beaverton Chamber, Caitlin and Kathy in Tualatin. I think the BRCs are terrific. They did a great job during the height of the pandemic. But getting back to this kind of thought about, we're stronger by having kind of a strong network where a small business owner can kind of interact with any part of that network and then get the full suite of services. I think one thing that we're interested in doing is, and this is part of Adrian's role, I think she might have had to drop off here. Oh, no, you're still there. There you are. My Hollywood box has just moved. Is thinking about connecting all of the organizations across the county that support small business and entrepreneurs, with understanding that each of these organizations has their own particular strengths and suite of services. But if we can connect everybody, then again, where any entrepreneur kind of steps into that system, they're able to access all of those services. And so Adrian and I are going to try to reboot a conversation with a bunch of the CBOs and chambers and other organizations about what that network might look like, and how we can work together to, again, make sure that no matter kind of what ups and downs we continue to see in this recovery period, that small business and entrepreneurs are able to access that support. And maybe I'll actually stop there. We're doing a lot more things here at the county. I could talk more about some of the workforce investments that we're making. We're doing some work around broadband countywide. So I'm happy to jump into any of those topics in particular, but I want to save some airtime for my colleague Dan here. And then, it's great. I'm seeing about 16 participants here. Would also be happy to have a conversation about things and take this conversation where you all want to take it. So with that, I'll stop. Dan, I'll turn it to you, and then happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Matt, and definitely want to echo the sentiment. I'll try to be just brief and touch on a few high-level points of both some trends we're seeing at the city level and also some key pieces that we're working on, hopefully that are familiar to some of you all, maybe some new items, and then definitely happy to have a conversation. But good morning, all. For those that I haven't yet met, I'm Dan Diaz, Economic and Community Development Director for City of Hillsborough. We work very closely with Matt at the county as it relates to some partnerships, obviously very close supporters and partners of the chamber. And in that role, part of my team works extensively with the business community, and then parts of my other team work on pieces that are of great importance oftentimes to our business community. Matt talked a little bit about some of the current economic trends. And so we've really been focused in terms of a lot of our business relationship side, first getting through the pandemic. And now as we're kind of coming out of the tail ends of the pandemic and some of the economic climate that Matt also spoke to, really trying to assess, okay, what is still needed and how do we continue to try to be both responsive and supportive to businesses. So as some of you probably know, during the hard heat of the pandemic with shutdowns and everything else, we were very proactive trying to get in with support grants, keep operations going at businesses, trying to be flexible for different types of, especially small businesses, with facility augmentations or additional support. Much of that effort is starting to wind down, but we've also made some efforts using our ARPA, the American Recovery Act plan dollars, to continue to support businesses in terms of reestablishing in the current economic climate. And that's really businesses of all size, but with an emphasis especially to small businesses. What does that look like? One key piece that we've done is we, in our downtown area, have had what's called a tenant and a storefront improvement grant, which is a matching grant to help businesses that have bricks and mortar space make modifications or changes to those. Pre-pandemic, it was mostly to kind of do facelift or do some marketing enhancements. During the pandemic, people were saying, hey, we need outdoor seating, or we need areas to engage our customers in a far different physical way than before. And in some cases, people were leaving bricks and mortar spaces altogether. So part of what we're doing with the ARPA funds is we've committed $1 million over the next 3 years to expand that type of tenant and storefront improvement grant program citywide. And we've also expanded the scope of it, not just to be for storefronts, so for new windows or paint or pieces there, but also to expand it to include additional lighting and security, because we've also heard from some of our small businesses that there are operational impacts that are being there too, in terms of restoring customer and consumer confidence coming back in those places of business. So that's one very specific program that we are in the process of deploying and have funded, given the support of our leadership and our city council's vision on that front. Matt talked a little bit about workforce development, and we see that as not only an immense challenge for the business side, but also an immense opportunity for our community side as well. We often speak of workforce development as a golden linkage when it's done well, because it is aligning access to jobs and wages and careers for hopefully our residents, whether they be part of the existing workforce or coming through educational programs and soon to be in the workforce. And we also see it as a key opportunity to support our businesses. Businesses of all size, unless you're a sole proprietor, need quality and reliable workforce. And so we are focused with Christy Wilson, who's our workforce manager on our staff, but working with a lot of partners, including the Chamber, Portland Community College, Hillsborough School District, many others, looking at a variety of workforce development programs. Again, some of which are skill up, helping people that might have lost employment during that tumultuous economic time during the pandemic, looking to get back into the workforce. How and where are we connecting them to our area businesses that need workforce? Or if they're also seeking additional skill training or skill up into getting into maybe new industries or new careers, how can we support there? And then we're continuing work that was done both pre-pandemic and for many years, but also in terms of career pathways and awareness. And there's a lot of different opportunities. We're looking at greater internship opportunities, in some cases apprenticeship opportunities, really to get people into different businesses, different careers and awareness. And we hope then from the business side that that's giving an access into additional employment pools, especially given the very low unemployment rates that Matt alluded to. And so I can share more detail on that in the future if need be. And then another big area, back to, for those of you on the early part of the call, some jokes about last night, but we had a really extensive conversation with our city council around transportation. And at first, transportation might not seem like an immediate, like direct business support, but it is critical to people moving around our community, accessing businesses, accessing additional services. And so transportation's been a long focus of the cities. It's one that we play in a county-wide sandbox, and a region-wide sandbox, and a statewide sandbox, in some cases even at a federal level. But we're continuing to really determine how to build out our local transportation networks, continuing to expand. I think we're close to like 80% of the city is now fully served by bike and pedestrian facilities. And we aspire to get to 100%, but that's creating that localized connectivity for people to access different neighborhoods, different businesses, and the like. We also continue to pursue expansion of transit opportunities. And that's a big one with TriMet right now, post-COVID, post-evaluation of a whole shakeup with remote work and you know, a lot of increased energy out kind of on the suburbs and the periphery of our region. And we have long identified and requested enhanced transit service and opportunities throughout our community and throughout different neighborhoods and districts. And so we believe that there's starting to take shape for an opportunity maybe to see some additional increased conversation and hopefully some realized benefit and service levels there. So happy to talk a bit more about that, but that's again important for the movement of people and goods and accessibility throughout our community and into neighboring communities. And then lastly, a big area that we've remained focused on both pre and post-pandemic is our work related to digital accessibility. And as our community and the world goes increasingly to a digital environment, whether you're a small business trying to get your goods and markets out there, or whether you're seeking services, or whether you're pursuing employment, whether you're trying to have meetings with long lost friends such as this one, and you're all in like 1x1 square boxes versus all in a room together. We have recognized that access to internet is hugely important. So we continue to deploy our Highlight, which is our municipal fiber, which is seeking to provide fiber and really high capacity internet access to portions of our community. That's in early phases of rollout. And then paired with that, we're using some ARPA funding, again, with the leadership of our council and city management, excuse me, to pair that with digital literacy trainings. And one big piece that we saw come out of the pandemic, especially with shutdowns and with more and more online meetings and stuff, is folks that either didn't have internet access and or didn't have the training or the means or the intuitiveness or just comfort and familiarity to interface with software systems and virtual systems in the world, really started to create additional disparities in terms of access and support. And so we have partnered with Prosperidad and a few others to really build upon and enhance digital literacy training. And some folks ask me, what is digital literacy? And I always try to explain it. It's a complicated spectrum. On one hand, I'll fall victim to this at some point today, like knowing when to turn your mute button on and off, or something as basic as that, or power on your device. And then on the other extreme end, which we also have in our community, can be all the way up to like advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning and how do those systems work together. But where most of our current effort is with our partners and really the need is, we believe is kind of in that early part of that spectrum, really that baseline accessibility, whether it's how to use, Microsoft systems to produce a resume, or whether it's, how do I create a website, because I need a greater digital presence for my small business. And so we are working with, we have interns that have been helping with some businesses to help to establish that web presence. So there's a lot of efforts there kind of in that broader digital access, digital literacy space that we're focused on somewhat as a result of the pandemic, somewhat just a transition into a broader digital economy. So I'll stop there, but those are some highlights from us, and definitely happy to hear questions or other topics or get into more depth as the group desires.
Brad. Elizabeth, I can't hear you. But Brad, go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing that Elizabeth was muted. I've been trying to do that for years. This question is for both Dan and Matt. I saw something a week or so ago that the city of Tigard has created a middle housing revolving fund using ARPA dollars. And I think what the gist of it is, and you guys might know better, that it's a loan program for people to get funds to build middle housing and then get permanent financing and return the money back to the fund. Is is anything in the works at the county level or the city level to do something like that? And I noticed also that they were doing other stuff to stimulate the middle housing, like kind of reducing SDCs, reducing permit fees, stuff like that. I didn't know where the county and the city are on those issues.
Dan, I'm happy to jump in first here. Thank you, Brad. Great question, and love learning from our colleagues there in Tigard. They're always putting together innovative new projects. This is a question that has come up in the past about what are the tools. Actually, I get a call about this probably about once a month from whether it's an affordable housing developer or another developer that's looking at a project in unincorporated Washington County. Well, what kind of package of services do you have to support new development, whether it's, again, different kinds of development? And I will say that right now we don't have too much as a way of incentive. However, these are things that are on the list to think about. One of the programs that I've been made aware of recently is the Cpace program, and I'm forgetting what the acronym is, but it's a program focused on sustainability, so focused on kind of energy efficiency, water efficiency, and seismic systems in either new developments or retrofits. And as I learn more about the program, so it provides a loan to a project to developers to install those systems as a way to reduce greenhouse gases and get to sustainability goals. But actually, as I learn more about the program, it does look like it could potentially be a development incentive because it reduces the financing costs of projects. And as as Brad, as you know, the interest rates are really changing rapidly, and again, construction inputs are going sky high. Those financing costs are getting really expensive, and so having some certainty around there, I think, would be really useful. So it is looking at development incentives in light of the board's priorities around providing housing and affordable housing and other types of development is something that is kind of in the works, but we don't have something currently that we're working on. A similar topic, Dan, before I turn it to you, the particular kind of mechanism, so to speak, that Tigard's using around kind of a revolving loan, I think is really interesting. And so for those of you who don't know, a revolving loan is a way of kind of it is what it sounds like, right? It's a way of having a loan for either a small business or a development project and that pays back into the fund, and so it can keep rolling, can keep revolving forward. And this concept has been something that Dan and I have been talking about, and others have been talking about at the county level. To do all sorts of things, whether it's support small businesses and entrepreneurs or support middle housing. It's really intriguing, again, because of that financial sustainability piece. Right now we're trying to figure out if we can use some of the federal funds that the county has to invest in a revolving loan. It gets a little bit complicated from a finance standpoint, and so we're kind of working through some of those things. But Brad, that is something that we were considering. Can we do a revolving loan fund at the county level to either support businesses or perhaps some other target?
Thanks, guys. Can you hear me now? Sorry, Brad. All right. Thanks for that. Other questions, other things to put in the chat there that we want to be asking about today? Dan, what I was going to say, but my headphones and my technology today are all out of whack, which is great. As I was going to make comments about the digital literacy work that you guys are doing. And as a former library board member, I'm curious what that's, if you guys have been working with the library on any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that type of work takes many partners, and there's also many different aspects and members of our community that have very differing needs. And so the library is a partner in general digital literacy work on a few fronts, and with some of the specific ARPA proposals, the library is a partner. We have identified Centro Cultural and primarily Prosperidad to be the primary point, in part because they were doing much of that digital literacy training, especially in those areas that need the most. and scaling it up, but using the library again to really kind of be a force multiplier and an access multiplier across that particular work. The library continues to have their own individualized programs as well that they've been operating. And my understanding is will continue to operate in the same spirit of support of that space. And then to come back around to Brad's question, if I can just throw the city's points on that. We right now do not have an established loan program similar to Tigard. We have been watching that program because it is kind of an interesting concept that we've not yet seen tried or proven yet. And so we are evaluating that. As many of you may know, and some of you, if you reside in Hillsborough, probably received a notice of this. We are in the process right now of adopting some of the state mandated middle housing codes right now. Those are not fully in effect yet at the city. They will be by the end of next month, we anticipate, barring appeals and things like that. And as part of that, and we've discussed this at our last 2 city council meetings, we have evaluated financial tools, including some of the pieces already mentioned on today's call, variable SDCs, looking at SDC waivers, and I can explain what those are. System development charges, I hate acronyms, sorry, are those costs that get put on new construction, new development to help bear some of the cost burden of the new infrastructure to meet that new demand. And so that's what we're talking about. So we're looking at, are there ways to finance or waive those pieces? Most of our established work to date and most advanced work, Brad, to your question, is tied more back to regulated affordable housing, also looking to middle housing. The market rate side of middle housing, we want to get through this code piece and through the community engagement. We've done assessments of those areas, but we just had a conversation with our council last night on this as well. There are many market related factors there of which tool is best to use or which tools are best to use to try to incentivize middle housing. Those that know Hillsborough, which I think most of you do, we already have a pretty heavy amount of middle housing throughout our community. You drive through areas where we have great concentrations of townhomes and duplexes and in some cases condos and that mid-rise multifamily, which is generally the definition of middle housing. So for us too, it's which tools will best help nudge the market, realize some of those housing deliveries and those policies. But there is a little bit of establishment period that we're looking at as well, where we want to see how does the market respond to our codes and some of that new zoning provisions that are not yet even on the books. And so we will kind of allow that code to go into effect. We will be evaluating real time. And another work plan piece that's on the horizon that's about a year out right now is we will go into a housing production strategy, which is a assessment of the overall housing needs in Hillsborough in capacity. And a big part of that will be, okay, how much can the market drive and determine on its own and at what affordability and price points and housing levels versus what tools potentially like the revolving loan program that Tigard offers is needed. And then where's it most needed and for what type of community impact and benefit. And so that, again, is in process. It's not fully finalized, as is the case with Tigard's, but it also isn't just, a brainstorm concept in our minds. Like we are doing evaluative work on that real time right now.
Thanks, Dan. It looks like we have a hand raised from Natasha. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, my question is for Matt. I'm so sorry, I'm having connection issues. I missed the name of the program that focuses on sustainability. I was wondering if you can tell me what that name or.
Sure, yeah. So Natasha, the program is as a Cpace program, CPACE. And actually there's only one county in Oregon that has this program enacted right now. That's Multnomah County. They work with Prosper Portland out of the city of Portland to administer that program. I hear that Deschutes County is interested in the Cpace program as well. And it's something that I'm learning more about. I can't speak to if the county would enact it anytime soon here. I'm just doing a little bit of research to understand more about a potential program that could support sustainability goals and potentially support housing like Dan was talking about or other types of development.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I believe there was a conversation, or I think I saw something this morning about an increase in interest rate coming from the Fed today, tomorrow, and that we might be headed for a recession. So any advice for businesses as we're looking to recession-proof businesses? Just a real softball question for you guys this morning. You're welcome.
Yeah. Did you want to put like a 10 or 15 words or less too on that?
Yeah, that'd be
or-
great. Yeah, like 2 sentences. You guys each have 15 seconds. And then I'll let Councilor Pace jump in with a rebuttal. How about that? Laughing so
I
hard.
realize this is going to be a macroeconomics final. Yeah.
It happens when the communications major is running the show today.
Yeah.
So.
Ed, you want to go first on that? I mean, I've got a few points I think to share that we've definitely been looking at, and we have similar concerns because we're kind of watching those same indications, but you want to cover it from a countywide standpoint and I'll focus in on the citywide.
Go ahead. You can go ahead and start there, Dan.
Yeah, so we are definitely hearing the same things and we're seeing that, right? I mean, increase of interest rates typically will increase the cost of both doing businesses. It can increase the cost and activity in the housing sector. So those are all pieces that we are very sensitive to and watching. How do we weather that and prepare that? And I'll go back to some analysis that our team is just concluding and we'll be sharing with our council and the public here in the not too distant future. So I'll give a bit of a sneak peek preview here to this group. Is we do an exercise every couple of years that's called an economic opportunities analysis. And it's a planning exercise that communities do that really seek to model economic trends and opportunities. And that then informs our land use planning, our infrastructure planning, our transportation planning, economic development related work. And that really is a twin effort that goes with the housing needs analysis. That's kind of back to that housing production strategy I talked about. So we're kind of always looking at, okay, what are the housing needs and demands, and like what do our residential growths or declines look like? And then at the same time, where's the economics and business activity looking like, and employment activity, and how do we try to keep those somewhat aligned? But one big piece that when we look back historically at past recessionary and economic hardship times, the most recent 2 large ones were obviously the significant drop off that we experienced during COVID and the impacts to our economy there. And then the Great Recession kind of in the 2008 through 2010 timeframe with really the housing crisis. There's a couple things that our community has planned and been able to weather some of those better than most. Now, that's not to say we don't feel a lot of negative impacts and slowdown, but we overall weather better. And that is staying focused with a heavy traded sector industry. What does that mean? A lot of our manufacturers, a lot of our target industries that we have in Hillsborough and in Washington County have, knock on wood, been a bit more stable during those windows. We saw during the great, this recent recession and COVID impacts, our unemployment levels, while they spiked like everybody else's, actually stayed a bit more stable, in part because those manufacturers and many of those business entities were able to keep people employed, incorporate certain safety protocols, and that kept people with incomes coming in and our economic conditions a little bit more stabilized than others that saw greater variability. So that's a big piece that we continue to watch and monitor. And we're watching not only like the housing market, okay, what might happen if interest rates crop up? Do we see slowing growth in our downtown and South Hillsborough and some of those new areas where we're seeing housing come online? And what does that look like? But also our target industries. What are those looking like? Because those are the driver of our economics. Those industries help continue to bring disposable incomes into supporting our restaurants, supporting some of our service sector and the like. And so that's a piece. I don't have the perfect answer or response to you today, Elizabeth Case, but we're trying to look to say, okay, our target industries right now have also been quite strong in the last couple of years. You've probably heard conversations around the semiconductor industry, and you've heard conversations around like global geopolitical dynamics that are driving supply chains to be more proximate resilient. That translates into potential economic opportunities, even in some economic headwinds of interest rates and recessionary windows that we might want to and be able to capture. So we're definitely looking at some of those pieces with the hope that would relate to a little bit, again, being able to weather maybe a recessionary period a little bit better than most. And then once we find out what the recessionary period is, then we, like we did with the COVID pandemic, figure out, okay, where are the biggest, what industry now is being hit the most? Is it housing? Is it service sector? Is it, manufacturing sector, wherever? And then we'll do our best to try to nuance and respond and engage there, similar to what we did in the last pandemic and similar to what we did the time before that.
And happy to pick it up from there. Great answer, Dan. You passed your AP Economics course with flying colors, clearly. Yeah. So I think where Elizabeth, where what makes me kind of think about this question is thinking about the county's emerging role in economic development. So again, the county, this economic development program started last year, and we're building it. We're getting it going. So it is something that was created during the pandemic. And one of the lessons that I think we've all seen in the pandemic is how inequitably the downturn affects different communities across our region and really across the nation. And so again, I think where we come back to is, well, what's the county's role in economic development, and what can we do to make sure that those that are most disparately impacted have the tools and the services that they need to not only survive through a downturn, but thrive and to grow into a different place. Macroeconomic trends are really hard to fight at the local level. You can't really, but can we create, again, can we think about strengthening the network of wonderful organizations that have good connections to local small businesses like the Chamber? I saw Jonathan Colonna on here, like Centro, like others that are within the community, know the businesses, know the struggles that they're going through. Can we at the county help strengthen that network by kind of bringing folks together? We do have some of these federal funds that we can put in there as support to build capacity and as resources. But that's kind of the way that we're thinking about it is kind of this convening support role. One thing I should mention here too is that one of the things that's really unique about Washington County is that if you were to take all of the folks that live in unincorporated Washington County and put them in one city, it'd be the second largest city in the state. We have over 200,000 residents in Washington County that are not represented at the city level. And that makes a huge difference when it comes to access to services, service delivery, and also around small businesses being able to have that support. And so that's something that we're directly paying attention to and trying to figure out how we can provide more specific and tailored services to businesses within those areas. I think the kind of last point here, as I kind of think about some of the other things that we're working on here at the county, is also making sure that folks have the tools that they need that are accessible and affordable to build their businesses in an economic tumult. We know that when the economy kind of takes this dive, a lot of folks are like, you know what, I'm going to start that business and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do it. And so they need access to those things so they can get that rolling. So we're working on a countywide broadband investment strategy. We just kicked it off a few weeks ago. And what we're trying to do there is bring together all of the jurisdictions across the county to look at how we're investing in broadband and how we are making sure that communities that are underserved can get reliable and affordable access to broadband. So this project is not just about the infrastructure. We're not just kind of looking to see where we might put a line here and there, but we're trying to lean into some of that digital literacy approach that Dan talked about earlier of how do people use technology? How can we enable folks that need technology to start their business, to grow their business? How can we make sure that they have that connection? And how do we work with partners across the county to look to some commonality around policy so that we're getting the speeds that we need? We're getting, there's affordable options for everybody, and we can really build out to a more universal broadband system.
Thank you for circling back to that, Matt. I wanted to touch on that earlier, so I appreciate you reading my mind there. Thank you very much. All right, Deanna.
Just a couple of questions regarding sort of the future. And I know during the pandemic, we were all kind of anticipating, what the commercial real estate market might look like, what the office market might look like. Kind of curious about what you've seen in terms of vacancy rates. And I've seen a lot in the headlines about Beaverton, of course, Hillsborough, getting restaurants that are opening up and things like that, that you kind of would have thought that might not have been happening. so soon. And I guess I'll just ask the question without piling on. How much are you seeing of the sort of Portland effect coming to the Washington County area?
Go ahead, Matt, you want to go first or?
Sure. Happy to jump in there. I mean, Deanna, to get to your last question there, I think there's some anecdotal stories about folks moving to the suburbs. I've seen little kind of concrete data about that. It's not to say that it's not out there, but I think I live in a condo with 2 kids. My wife and I live in a condo with 2 kids, and we wish we had a backyard. So when I come out and visit Dan in Hillsborough, some Hillsborough real estate looks really nice. So I think that makes a ton of sense. To get back to your question around the real estate industry, yes, I mean, I think again, when you look at some of the numbers, the vacancy rates are pretty low. And I think some of the challenges that we have in Washington County are around kind of the puzzle pieces around different kind of where companies might go and what kind of what the economics means for redevelopment. So what do I mean by that? I was talking with some folks in South County recently, and they have some prime employment land where they're really interested in trying to focus on more high technology, advanced manufacturing companies. And right now they have some companies that are terrific local companies, but they're trying to work with them to find a place for them to go, and they can't find a place for these companies to move within their community. Likewise, I've seen some areas where you have buildings that in the real estate industry we'd called functionally obsolete. They are older buildings that have been around for a while, but they are kind of demanding market rents because, again, there isn't the economics don't make sense for those buildings to be repositioned or redeveloped into new construction. And so I think one of the things that Dan and I talk about, and we talk with other economic development managers across the county, is how we can all work together across city jurisdictions and with the county to be thinking about how we're responding to business development and the need for more space for companies. So Dan, I don't know if you want to pick it up from there from a Hillsborough perspective.
Yeah, I do. And Dan, I might need just a brief refresher to make sure I cover the questions because it was thought provoking and I started immediately going in a couple different areas. So I might miss parts of it, but anecdotally, for sure, we are seeing both businesses and residents continue to increase. I, like Matt, and we got this question from our council last night as well, which is a very astute one. We are working to try to get quantitative data to also verify and explain to what degree actually is that happening. But in conversations that our economic development teams are happening, there are businesses seeking of all sizes and of different industries seeking to locate into our community. Some of them coming from more major urban centers in the region, and some of them coming from other regions as well, and finding our community attractive for a variety of reasons, and in part maybe some of the shifts that you alluded to in your question. Similarly with the housing, and it's not surprising that even pre-pandemic, pre-remote work, pre-physical spacing and everything else, the region did a housing preference survey, and it said most people prefer to what Matt's sentiments just were, which is, boy, I'd really like to have a house with a little bit of my own yard. And then it gets back to, okay, then how much of that is out there and how much can people really afford? And that's where we get into these other kind of policy nuances and at times conflicts of how much of that really can we also provide when we look at middle housing and additional densification within our urban growth boundaries and the like. So we're definitely seeing it. How are we trying to prepare and support it? Is one similar to what Matt alluded to. We are trying to have adequate sites and capacity for those businesses to expand. And I talked a little bit about those storefront and tenant improvement grants. We're trying to have a funding source there to help people potentially, if they're ready or already in an existing space, wanting to retrofit that, again, for operational needs or aesthetic needs. If they're growing and maybe a small company or startup moving into an existing space, then they can also make that their new physical business presence and hopefully lead to some success there. And then what we're also doing is land planning. So we're in the midst of reinitiated a area up by the north end of town, kind of up by Hillsborough Airport, called Jackson East. That really is one of our last remaining areas to add employment land capacity from a greenfield standpoint, meaning new construction, new opportunities in the city as well. And so that's hugely important as we see large industries, medium industries, small industries and businesses all seeking space. And the successes of our homegrown business growth is we have companies coming to us right now saying, boy, I've been on TV Highway or Cornelius Pass for the last 15 years and I weathered the pandemic storm and I'm ready to expand now. Like, where can I go? And the last thing we want to be telling them is, we don't have anywhere in our community you can go. Luckily, maybe you can go to a neighboring community, or maybe you need to go look somewhere else, or don't take advantage of that economic opportunity. Why don't you just stay what you are? And that's, none of that is a good response as it relates to supporting those kind of corporate citizens, corporate members, and business members of our community. So we're looking to plan that land, hopefully, and make it available to help support some of that. And then lastly, to your point about vacancy rates, one heartbreaking trend, like in retail especially, is retail continues to drop off pretty substantially, right? And be in this great world of transition with e-commerce and many disruptions there. But it also is such a sense of that retail group makes the feel of our community, the types of restaurants, the types of small business stores, whether it's in our downtowns or in some of our other neighborhoods like Tanasbourne. That is what makes the place and it's special here. And so we are still seeing a lot of interest and activity in our downtown. Absent an appeal right now on a land use matter, we would have 4 really great, relatively local, small, businesses going into the old vacated US Bank site in our downtown. And so we're seeing a lot of that type of opportunity and activity as well, which I get excited about because those are additional small businesses being vibrant in our community. It's also amenities that continue to make Hillsborough a great spot to be and live and have fun.
Thank you. Appreciate both of the responses.
We have just a few minutes left here today, and Brad Smith has another question. Fantastic.
This one's for Dan. You had mentioned the storefront grant is expanding citywide. When is that happening, and do businesses qualify that don't own the property? So if they want to do something to help their business, but it's a landlord has to approve, how does that happen?
Yeah, so our council has authorized that funding. We are working on communication pieces that are starting to make their way out into the communication, and we're also channeling those through some of our partners. It's been really important to us to be communicating that out, especially multilingually, given the diverse array of community and businesses that we have here. So that information is coming out. I can throw the link out to this group after the meeting too, or those materials if that helps. It is a matching grant with a maximum funded amount from the city of up to $40,000. It also is a maximum of 50% that we will contribute towards a project. So those are kind of the 2 ceiling thresholds for the award amounts. And to your question about if you don't own the property, businesses can still apply and receive an award. What we do need is the landowner's consent, though, because oftentimes it's making physical modifications and changes to that building or that asset. So that's not a prohibitor. It just requires that tenant and that landlord to kind of be on the same page and both sign off on the request.
Matt, sort of a follow-up question to what Dan was saying earlier about the Jackson East. Where are you seeing growth in Washington County? Are there surprising new areas where you're seeing businesses kind of trend towards or grow to, or is it just?
Sure. Yeah, no, sure. Good question. I mean, I think there's actually a lot of development happening all across Washington County. So if we, think about different types of development, there's a few expansion areas where there's planned housing developments happening. There's certainly infill continues. Dan alluded to some of the retail work that some local cities have been have been really pushing. Beaverton in particular has been really successful with their restaurant approach. My gosh, they've got so many cool, great restaurants there in central Beaverton. It's quite the scene. When you get to kind of industrial and some of, Dan had been talking about some of our dominant industries around semiconductor and advanced manufacturing. This is where I think it gets, actually in biotech too, this is where I think it gets pretty interesting. We're starting to see quite a bit of growth in the South County area. So you look at a lot of the space along Tualatin Sherwood Highway in Sherwood and Tualatin, and to some extent in Wilsonville as well. There's a lot of development happening down there. Some of those projects, interestingly, are part of the supply chain of some of our larger semiconductor employers. So thinking about Intel, so I think it's really interesting and telling that you're getting a lot of that growth down there when, Intel is based in Hillsborough and kind of stretched out kind of across the county there. But it speaks to, again, companies wanting to be here in the Portland metro region, wanting to be in the west side and looking for what's available. So again, in that area, we've had a lot of really exciting starts. I think you might have seen Twist Bioscience is opening up a new facility down in Wilsonville. There's Lamb Research is expanding in that area, and there's a number of others there. I know Dan can speak to Hitachi and Genentech and some of the other recent expansions in Hillsborough that have been happening. But as I talk to economic developers, there are folks looking for sites all over. Forest Grove is getting a lot of interest, which a number of years ago when I was doing kind of commercial real estate work, they usually wouldn't get a second look. But now, I know that there's some more and more interest in some of the available land out there. So there's quite a bit going on. Yeah.
Elizabeth, I have a pretty quick question for Dan and Matt. We're right in the midst of this Blue Ribbon Semiconductor committee that's looking at a number of different things. But if you just look at land use, and if you had a magic wand, what would be the one thing you would hope would come out of this Blue Ribbon committee related to our land use policies in the state of Oregon? Real quick little softball for you.
Matt, you want that one first?
Just a softball, Deanna. Just a softball. Yeah. I can go first. Happy to go first. I think that some of Intel in particular's recent announcements have started some really interesting and productive conversations specifically around semiconductor. And I think it's been, I've been in some of these conversations. We're not part of the task force, and so I'm just as excited as others to hear about what the task force has to say there. But I think it's really reflective of the times and kind of the change of the economy and the need to support some of our dominant industries. So, I think that there is potential to, continue to support these companies in a variety of different ways. Deanna, I think that's what I can say for today. I mean, this really gets to a Board of County Commissioners question, and I will leave it to them to be our guides for where this might go from there. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Matt, because I think that just opened the door for me to punt to Councilor. I'm just kidding. But let me give my thoughts on this, because we're very close to this, obviously, given Hillsborough's existence as a major semiconductor hub, not only for the region, the state, but frankly globally, especially with not only the presence of Intel, but Gyro Semiconductor and Corvo here in our community, and the many suppliers. Matt alluded to Hitachi. I won't get into the whole, ecosystem of the hundreds of additional businesses that are also here employing Hillsborough and Washington County residents and supporting other Hillsborough and Washington County businesses. But to your question, I think one of the biggest things that needs to come out of that semiconductor task force is Oregon, the Portland region, Washington County, and Hillsborough looking in the mirror to say, what is it we are? And then what is it we want to be, especially as it relates to this key industry? That industry is the most significant economic driver of our state, period. You look at exports, you look at income taxes, you look at payroll. It drives so much of all the other activities that are happening both in Hillsborough and in our regional community. What we need to understand is we have been successful with that industry in part because we have planned for adequate sites, we have planned for adequate infrastructure, we've planned and had adequate workforce to date. We also have a state that has a very unique land use system, in some cases very merit-worthy, in other cases very constraining. When the size of those campuses, due in large part to the technologies and the equipment and the facilities that go into them, not to mention the economies of scale, you don't buy one roll of toilet paper at a time, you buy 34, and during the pandemic, you buy 68. The economies of scale drive those sizes up. As our staff closely monitor that industry and the announcements, sites that are in the newspaper, this isn't secret information, are hundreds of acres, in some cases over thousands of acres in size. Why? Because the size and those economies of scale in those facilities are requiring it. So then I go back to us being in the mirror. Hillsborough, one of those communities that often is looked at sometimes jealously so, is, well, you have all the industrial land and everything else. Again, we're not lucky. Like, that takes a ton of planning, that takes a ton of local political will, that takes a ton of politics and, you know, process and everything else. And then hopefully you come out the tail end with something. We are orders of magnitudes off of that right now, both within our city, within our region, and within our state. Total remaining industrial land Hillsborough has, I think, on a gross acreage standpoint, roughly is about 650 acres. And some people are like, that's a ton of land. It really isn't. Ronler Acres by itself, which is now, relatively speaking, a small fab campus, is 450 acres proper, and Intel owns about another 120 acres around it. So one of the biggest things I hope that comes out of that conversation is, if our state continues to want to benefit from and see the value of that industry and that opportunity for future generations of Hillsboroughians and spin-off businesses and residents and workforce, we have to address some of those policy and those systematic pieces that we have in place that are precluding us from really being attractive to that industry. And if not, I think we really need to be ready to then be prepared to not only miss the prospective opportunities, but ramifications does that have for us to continue to nurture and support the existing facilities that are here? Because I'll throw one last piece out with a minute left. Intel, when we look at the history of what they've had in Washington County, has been great for us, right? They started with their campus down off of TV Highway in Aloha. That was a first fab outside of California. And over a period of time, that fab was at one point in time, its cutting edge facility of Intel. And then it became second and third generation, still hugely important, but no longer that leading edge piece you hear everybody talk about as well. When they outgrew Aloha campus, they worked with the city of Hillsborough and aggregated and created the Ronler Acre campus. So Aloha campus, I believe, is about 58 acres, Ronler Acres, 450 acres. You could see that size jump 30 years ago, the difference there. And now you look at 450 acres to 1,300 acres, you can see almost another proportional type of expansion. We have a lot of exciting news. We just cut the ribbon on Mod 3, right? People see the cranes, they're building out Ronler Acres. Go to Google Aerial sometime and you'll see that campus starting to also reach full capacity. So a big piece too that I'd encourage us to look at that state semiconductor task force is, when Ronler fully builds out, fast forward 15 years beyond that too, and are you still, as a state and as a region and as a county and as a city, still the innovative hub of that critical industry that's driving the global digital economy as well? How badly do you want it or not? And are you ready to really make hard political and policy conversations to prepare for that? Because we are already, not to be Eeyore here, behind the game on that. New York, Albany, New York, Phoenix, Arizona. We heard about Columbus, Ohio. If anybody says Ohio to me again, like, you owe me a coffee. Those states want it. They're already ahead of this game. We've got to really get serious about that. And that's what I hope that task force does.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
I hope I at least foul tipped that softball.
Well, thank you all for being here today, and a special thanks to Matt and Dan for being here with us, joining us today to answer our questions and share all sorts of great insights with us. We appreciate all you're doing throughout the county and the city. And so thank you all for being here today. And it is 11:01, so we will let you get back to your regularly scheduled programs, and we will see you in a couple of weeks for the business walk reveal. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Bye.